And then, of course, we have Jill, who is has been very kind to come. We had to reschedule, but I'm very kind to come this week. She is a gardener and she's the owner of Violetear Studio. She teaches classes and workshops on a range of gardening and design topics throughout the day and online. And no matter what the subject is, her foundation is always on ecological gardening, waterwise practices, and how to incorporate native plants. Originally trained as a public interest lawyer, Jill believes that all people can benefit from gardening, from building a nurturing connection with the joy of the garden. And we're really thrilled to have her last year. So Saratoga, you did this, and so I'm super happy that it's in Los Altos because it's closer for me and I get to see it again. So it's a wonderful, wonderful demonstration. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for having me. Please let me know as I'm talking if you want me to lift or rotate in any way so you can see better. The whole point is for you to learn how to do this at home. So don't hesitate to interrupt me. So again, my name is Jill Sowards, of Violetear Studio in the East Bay. And I teach a range of topics, although for all of them, I always try to incorporate native plants, not just because it's sort of, I think we're duty bound to do that, but because they are some of the most, gorgeous plants in the world, and we're so lucky to have them. And so it's a wonderful way to celebrate them. This is especially something that I love to do because as the sort of season quiets, if you've collected slowly over time, you have this wonderful kind of historical record of the year. Sometimes past years even can work their way in. And so, a lot of things have gotten a little damp recently. I think there are still things to salvage if you haven't already dried them. And then I will also say, the sort of warm, wet swing that we're getting, may even have some things blooming again. So get out quickly and capture them. So today I will talk a little bit about how to dry your native plants, and then how to construct both the wreath, but also sort of wreath forms, a couple of different ways. I'll talk about the materials that I like to use and how I like to use them. I'll talk a little bit about care, and then I have a list of plants. I'll share them with your moderators, and then they can send it out to all of you. So you have this, obviously not an exhaustive list, just sort of what I was pulling from my far too overstuffed stores. But yes, so I will begin. So the materials, I hopefully, I try to always, everything that I use is, I try to make it as sustainable as possible, either using something that I have or at least something that can be composted. That said, if I name something and you have something that works and you already own it, by all means use that. Hopefully you will recognize as I talk that there are a million ways to do all of these things. So this is just sort of the starting gambit for you all. So what I like to use, if possible, is a wreath made out of any kind of vine. This is California grape. Very easy to do. I don't have any fresh vine with me, but it would essentially be this. You just twist sort of your main big piece like that, like a little knot, and then kind of keep wrapping other pieces around it, and you will end up with something like this. You can go bigger, you can go smaller, thicker, thinner, however, whatever works for you. That's, I think, the easiest, but any sort of vine cutting, clipping will do this. If you have a piece, a length that you've maybe already pruned, or something that's getting a little harder as the season turns, you can also soak them in a little bit of water and they'll get soft again. Again, a day like today, they probably are soft again. You can sort of bend them, but I think it's a lovely way to use vines, especially if you're doing any pruning. And they also have all these sort of fun fiddly bits. But the other thing that's nice is, especially when you're gathering from your own garden, or if you're sort of finding things in neighbors' front yard, whether you've asked or not, you can sort of, you don't have to cover the entire space. You can just sort of use what you have, and then you still have kind of attractive looking pieces. I'm very much favor the half moon style. Sorry, there's a chain fern trying to participate. And so I think it's a really easy way to, you sort of use less, do more with less if you have sort of a vine base. You can also always use a wire base. You can buy bases at a hobby shop. The other thing that's nice about this is, and I guess any wire base too, is if you get tired of anything or it starts to fall apart, you drop it and it crumbles, you can just clip off the back and reuse it. Or if you get really tired of it, you can compost the whole thing. So that's another reason to use a vine base. The other thing that I like to use, especially when I'm working with dried plants, I often will use thread. This is cotton thread. I selected only because it was, I had it from some other project, and again, it can go in the compost. Anything you have should be fine. I also recently learned that thread doesn't have, its sort of strength doesn't last forever. So you actually, it's a good use to sort of not, if you're making something that kind of has to withstand a lot of action, you probably want to use like a fresher thread. And so it's great to be able to recycle, use it in something like this that hopefully won't get a lot of heavy use. I don't know what you do with your wreaths. But yeah, so I like to use thread, and I'll show you how I use that. But especially for sort of what can be sometimes brittle pieces, it's sort of a little bit softer sometimes. The other thing that's nice about thread is that even though the material is dried, and I'll talk about the stuff that is not, even though the material is dried, it still can lose a little bit of moisture over time. Again, when we had this wild heat wave in October, everything I had like shrank a little bit more, even though they had been, fully dried for years, if not more. And so yeah, so what's nice about this is it'll kind of catch a little bit, like it's sort of any flopping that happens, it'll sort of move with that material, so it can be helpful. If for whatever reason it's ripping for you, it's feeling fussy, or also sometimes when I'm attaching it to wreath form, I'll use a wrapped wire. It's a little bit softer than sort of the traditional wire. So it's almost like an in-between kind of thread wire, but I like to use that. Again, I'll send this in the materials. And last but not least, this is very easy to find. You can find it at a hardware store. It's just, sometimes it's called a florist wire, but it's just green wire. It comes in different colors. It also can be nice if you find, again, most hobby shops will have sort of simple, copper or silver wire for jewelry making. You can also find it at a hardware store for, electrical work. Useful. But it can be a pretty sort of shimmery bit, even though it's kind of part of the make, it's still sort of nice and glimmery in the evening. So another thing to consider if you're in the wire market. So the material here today, again, all native plants. One of them is native to Colorado. It's a mountain native. But it's all native California plants. Most plants will dry upside down, sort of your standard, gather and flip. Now, again, not an exhaustive list, but usually umbellifers like yarrow can often dry upright. So all you would do is sort of put them in, any sort of conical base can you have is fine, with like a little tiny bit of water, rest it in there and let them dry open, and that will keep their shape open rather than getting like really tight and sort of closed up. But again, just about everything, fine facing down. The one thing to do if you can is make sure you're giving them a fair amount of air, sort of air movement through your space. So I would say I wouldn't probably bundle this entire thing to start drying. I would break it into two maybe, just give them a little more air movement, and then also try to keep them out, if you can, keep them out of direct sunlight, because that can cause fading. A lot of heat can also make your plants, your dried flowers a little overly brittle. Again, I live in the Bay Area and we don't have air conditioning, so when it gets really hot in the summer, there's not much to do besides like move it into darker rooms. But so part of life, and I actually think it's a lovely part of sort of this work is just that it is very much, it sort of speaks to its season. It speaks to, the year, all of those sorts of things. This is a yarrow that, normally, it's a cultivated yarrow. Not the terracotta, but the pink charm, and it's very much not pink any longer. And again, it was sort of out longer. Usually, what you want to do is pick things sort of in their prime, as you would sort of a regular cut flower, and then dry from there. If they're sort of past their prime, they can get a little seedy, a little brittle. This this heat kind of sent it off, sort of seeded and dried almost in situ. And so again, it made it like a really cool shape and form and color that, I don't know that I could ever like replicate necessarily from year to year. Although I guess with our changing climate, maybe. And so, yeah, so again, sometimes I'll find something growing in a garden or, I was joking, in a meridian is sometimes where I find things that look beautiful, but might be a little brittle, like in a little past due. So I sort of make a note next year, get it earlier, and then you'll sort of be able to recreate kind of the same look and feel. But again, just about everything can be dried. And I think it's really wonderful to sort of see those shapes and colors. Again, if you keep it out of the sun, keep it out of a really hot room, you'll be able to often capture color a little bit, sort of better and longer. But I think it's also fun to, again, have something that just was a one-time only experience. So the other thing to say is, depending on sort of how much space you want to devote to this, an activity like this, just collect over time. You don't need to go to a nursery and buy up tons of anything. Just kind of, over the course of a year, you could easily sort of trim up a plant like this a few times and say that all of these were once in water to start, and then they were dried after. If it's in your home, a little bit of time, in your kitchen is fine. Just sort of move it on again before it gets too overblown, too wilty. And most again, what's the wonderful thing about California natives is they all tend to be, drought tolerant. And that also makes them great for drying because they're just sort of made to kind of deal with a little bit less water. They can use water in a different way. And so they're all kind of, it's not a daffodil, let's say. So yes, I like to collect over time. And sometimes I don't necessarily have a vision for any of these materials ahead of time. I just know that they probably will look nice together. And then you sort of have a little collection and sort of play with it when you have it, or when you get it. So the main, with these materials, the sort of main, you can make a wreath in so many different ways. And I should say, I'm going to use a sort of standard circle base, since some of you may be like laying tables for various holiday events in the coming weeks. You can also use just like truly a straight stick that you find in the park, and you can wrap onto that and make sort of more like a centerpiece garland too. That works. I don't know why this one is so interesting to me and other people. So I'll talk about wreath making, but again, it also works for fully evergreen, all plant material will work for this. Usually, I think an easy way to start is by making little mini bundles. So whatever material you have, sort of lay it out kind of like this. It helps to have it sort of grouping. It gives you, I think, almost like a subconscious awareness of just about how much material you have kind of to play with. And then you just sort of make bundles like this. I'll show you this particular version, but you make little bundles, little mini bouquets, and then you can attach them, separately, individually, in your place. If you're using this route, or if you're the other way to do it is to do sort of more of a freehand, and that is just collecting sort of pieces. You can trim them, or do what I just did and sort of like snap as you go. Most dried plants work pretty easily. Something like this a little harder. I'm going to snip that, but again, if I have one hand free, I can grab my snips and go like that, and then just sort of bulk up across the table like as you go, and then hold it and wrap it on that way. So free form is fine too. Whatever sort of speaks to you. Both, I think there's maybe if you have the bundles, you can sort of, exactly how much space you're using, and if you definitely need more of something. But I think again, you're sort of, your eye hand will figure out about how much space you're filling in the same way when you're doing a single material sort of make also. But if you're doing whichever way you choose, if you're doing a full wreath, or again half moon, something like you're doing up and a down, and the sides are separate, whatever you're doing, always start at what would be sort of the top point of the connected area, and then work your way down, so that you're covering the feet of sort of the grouping atop. So it's like that would be is how I'll apply these to the wreath. And when you're making, I usually recommend, if someone's doing the sort of more bouquet method, if you make something, it's sort of like first pancakes. Sometimes it's like a little too small, it's a little sideways, the colors are funny, whatever it is. Usually I'll make about 3 kind of with my general general goals going, and then sort of see how they look. If you're like me and sometimes make them smaller than you ultimately want them, rather than undo everything, just take sort of the largest piece that you have, the largest piece or extra piece that you have, and just kind of build out the back and just attach from there. You don't need to undo the whole thing, just sort of add to it. But I think if in my classes, I have one kind of complaint questions, people say, oh, this looks smaller than I meant it to. So just kind of build out like that. You don't need to, again, take anything away. So as I'm building these little guys, and again, I'll start one, put that there, and put these together. Usually you have something like this. And whatever has happened to it in your garden as it travels, that, you know, can't do a lot necessarily. It's sort of modern, I don't know, like a touch of that. So usually, whatever you're working with, you're kind of going to break it down and remake it in the way it looks in your mind's eye. So I think what I see here, besides sort of this lovely, almost sagey color, is the sort of peaks and spikes. So what I do is just kind of break down your material. I'm pulling from this too because it's sort of a full length and has the tip, which is so pretty. But again, especially if you're pulling from your own garden, you might not have a trillion tips that you want to sacrifice to one piece of material or one wreath. So it's always good to, again, kind of cut all the way down. And as you're doing that, so again, that's just one piece. I've cut it into multiple lengths, and I'll sort of feature this. If this is my outward facing on the wreath, I'm doing it reverse for myself, sort of feature that main point piece because that's sort of the best looking. And then stack behind it and you sort of build out that space. So again, I think this is what we see, but you're sort of seeing it builds up that color, whereas this alone is kind of a little puny. And won't give you much, whereas that's a lot of structure. If you have a tip like that, and again, I'm sort of cutting through without looking very carefully, just trim down at an angle, just almost like you would prune, so that you hide that cut, and then it sort of disappears into the plant. And again, you can sort of judge before and after. Usually if it's like, this is my sturdy structure, I have a lot of it. It's always good if you have something that's a bunch that you can kind of bundle and make your background piece no matter what you're doing. So that would be my background. And then the yarrow again is pretty, I want to say like tough, bulky, can handle up. Let's I'll turn that out. So the same thing, rather than using an entire kind of broccoli top, I'll sort of trim them down. Never think that anything needs to be thrown away. All of this can, at the very least, just be scattered in your garden and see if it takes seed. But every tiny little piece, you know, the little things that you rip off will often be kind of that little extra last piece that you want. The other thing that I'm doing is, and I did it here too, is rather than making a sort of a bunch like that, where it's sort of almost horizontal, sort of, you know, three-dimensional out, is to layer your pieces. So that's my largest, and I'm sort of finding a home for it here, and then I'm stacking down. So again, it's the same amount of material. I just think it reads a lot bigger, and sort of fuller. And then take some chain fern. What else do I have in here? Chain fern, orange. Right. So chain fern, I love it in all of its colors. There's like, I was just looking at this, it's like purple. There's like yellow green. It's so lovely. And you know, a wonderful sort of plant in all respects, whether it's in your garden or making it. This too, again, so that's kind of I would say like the pretty part, and this is not the pretty part, but this has a lot of action that has sort of animated visual interest. So maybe I want to put that in the kind of more front and center, so you can see that curl, but that little extra piece makes a great little filler either in front or behind to kind of, again, just bulk out things you don't see, but you sort of sense. And then, let's see, I'll take some of my orange. And ideally you do trim these little bits off if you're having trouble holding sort of pincher. It doesn't bother me, and when I wrap, it'll all like kind of crunch up, so I'm not super worried about it. But if you're having trouble keeping everything together, feel free to sort of take some time to trim them down. Since the feet are sort of covered, I always think more bulk is better. But yeah, up to you. Let's see, where's my front? There's my front, sorry, my thumb is on. So I pulled these pieces off. And this, again, this is borax. So the only problem is this grows in my neighbor's garden, and I have permission, I asked. But I don't know, it's borax, but I don't know if it's the Wilsonii or the other three varieties, but it's so beautiful, that copper. One thing is wonderful is this is sort of, it's like height of summer version is this, and it sort of starts almost like almost this color, and then it caramelizes, and then if you leave it on for a really long time, then the seeds get bigger and it turns like burgundy, which is like, how magical is that? And the other thing that's wonderful about this is sort of, not maybe some of the global crises that are going on in the world. Like, once you start focusing on this, it might make you like turn wildly when you pass a park, but it's like, so it just makes the whole kind of street animate in a different way. And you're suddenly like, what is that? I'm sorry. It just, it's like, it's such a wonderful thing. So definitely ask your neighbors what that thing is. If you, as native plant enthusiasts, if you don't know what it is, don't take it. And also, if you don't know what it is, definitely don't take it if it has a berry on it. And if you don't listen to me on the first two things about not taking it, not using, you do use it and it has a berry on it and you don't know what it is, make sure you take the berry off when you put it in the compost, put the berries in the trash, and that way, if it is something that shouldn't be around, it's not in your compost, not in the municipal compost. That's just a foraging tip. Let's see, although with all the sort of images we can get from plants, I feel like what's great is you can sort of figure out whatever it is, on the hike. So again, I'm going to try, I'll show you just both versions. So for this, with a little bit of thread, what I do is I'll sort of pinch using like these two fingers to hold, and then pinch with my thumb, and then this will hold itself. You don't need to do anything in terms of tying off, and just go around a bunch of times, sort of tourniquet style. And then just pull off, and that will hold like that. The other thing you can do is just like cut a length of that, same thing, just hold the pinch with your thumb across and then wrap it around. And what's nice about this is it's usually just one turn will do it, and then you can do like a sort of twist tie on the back. And sometimes it's really great is if you have enough length, you can actually use that just to attach right over, but don't let that kind of hang you up. So I have a couple different bundles. I'll put these all on now. I've got my everlasting. I'll show you how to put these on. Another thing that can be fun is, again, all of this can sort of be reused many times. You can sort of keep cutting off the bundles, adding to them, putting them in other things. So if you do have any evergreen needs this season, the two of plants that dry really nicely, like they keep their green and they kind of just sort of like, you're like, are you dry? Coyote bush and bay, and also if you have it, some of the bushes are flowering now really beautiful because they have like the bud is like that little shimmery silver, again, lovely light reflecting qualities. And so what you can do is again put that in and it will just sort of fade like a little shrinky, but otherwise the same. So what you can do is either use it in your immediate bundle, or what I often will do is I'll make its own sort of, I'll make a bundle, so again, cutting them down to sort of make something bigger. And I would say there's absolutely no kind of rhyme or reason to sizes for any type of wreath. For evergreen wreaths, I find like usually I'm aiming for something about palm sized that kind of like fills the space. I don't know. But again, break it down as much as you can or want, and then you can make that its own bundle. Tie that onto your wreath, or again onto like sort of like a stick or something. But you do that and like layer like that, and then once this fades, once the evergreen fades, you can take that off and sort of make it a more permanent kind of dried wreath. And then you can either take all the pieces off, rearrange them again, or slip in the same kind of type of bundle. So I could start like that. Have this booth in front and behind, and then pull that out and just put these back together, something like that. Because again, once they're attached, you can see the attachment, you can just snip it right off. So to show you attaching, some wire here. So again, this I find it really easy to use. Something like this is pretty thin. You can go very, very thick. And sometimes when I do go thick, what I'll do is using either this wire or the wrap wire, I'll string it through like a pole to hold it. But this is again pretty thin, so it can hold its own. So just like that. And you can sort of choose what you want. If you want it to keep in line and sort of be about not much bigger than the width of your shape, or be sort of more streamlined, go directly against your shape. If you want it to be fuller, although often requires more bundles, then cheat out, and that again gives you a lot of sort of extra height width, but again, you're using more material overall. And then just wrap it. So what I've done is, I don't know if you can see that as well, cross it like that. And usually again with these, it's just one sort of secure you can start about like that. And just goes on. However you can twist it. Tight enough, but and that's pretty secure. You can fold in the back, and usually what I'll do is leave the ends, and then if I can really see something, I'll trim it afterward if it's like hanging on the inside. But again, there's lots of wiggly bits, so maybe you won't even notice. So not that you need to like a plan for going faster, but I'll just sort of do this with one-handed sort of snip and attach like that. And again, as you're laying it, you can decide if you want to sort of push down or up. You're sort of finessing around each other. Another thing you can do is get more of a just a single bough of something and add, if you have willow, like a willow that's turned, or again, even something like this, you can just have that single piece and lay them across. And that kind of gives you, again, that sort of same kind of new and, green and dried interest. Let's see, can I have this? So just one, so again, care, just like drying, ideally outside of direct sunlight. Maybe not your hottest room, will last a little bit longer, but again, it's sort of, I think there's, they will last for a very long time without any, care, any attention, not needing to keep a room cold for the sake of saving the wreath. I think again, they're sort of living things. It is interesting though, how they kind of, even in their sort of senescence, they kind of exhale and inhale depending on the moisture or the heat and that sort of thing. If they were in a very damp place, they can get mildew. Again, that's usually not our problem, but they can get mildewy. And the other thing is that having something that's sort of everlasting, they can get a little dusty. So if that happens, you can either do a reverse on your vacuum cleaner, or if you have a hair dryer, just blow them a little bit. You can also get like the air, the non-aerosol spray air things. All of those just kind of give them a dust, and that way they won't look sort of older. Maybe not. Oh, yes. Right, so that's my last bundle. So does anyone have any questions? Yes.
What about using twine? Twine or rope?
Yeah, twine is wonderful. Twine is great. The only thing is sort of making sure you have it tight enough, but other than that, it's absolutely great. For that, what I usually do is make it more, I treat it kind of like I would a thread, and so I'll start as I'm attaching it. I'll start with like an anchor like this, so it's on securely, and then I just hold that as loose, and then apply each piece like that, and then wrap it like that. So I'm not taking the twine on and off just because the tension isn't as tight as the wire. But yeah, that works really well. And I think anything, sometimes we want to hide things. Other times it's actually fun to use a colored, ribbon or twine, anything like that. Just add sort of, again, texture, color. You can sort of match the color, contrast it. I think it's sort of fun to see, sort of the hand of the maker in that also. But it's hard when I'm like that. I was very upside down. So yeah. And these are, I think it was just sort of the afternoon, sort of in and out with fog and sun, but I had sort of more subdued colors. They're, you know, in your own garden, very many things would have much brighter pops and stuff. If you're sort of using the Doug telling me, method of gardening, sort of, 70-30 native to non-native, your 30 might also be giving you, gopherina and things like that, like really retaining pops of color too. So those are great. Yeah.
What about making the wreath but non-dried?
Yes, same, absolutely the same thing. The only sort of caveat is you want something that's more in the evergreen foliage department. So even like leucadendron, things like that. That won't like kind of.
But do you need to spray them or something to give them moisture?
Yes,
or-
ideally if you can, and if you have a combination of saying, again, even in this example, if you have a combination, just if you can spritz them, that's great. Again, indoor, outdoor, they both will work. Then just sort of, if you can use some dried material, like just block that as you spray. And that will that way it won't get gunky with the water. A little bit of spray outside, with moisture like today, you probably wouldn't even need to. So the other thing about, sorry, okay, aspirated and Yara. The other thing about using, especially native plants, especially seeded things, which can be so beautiful, or buried things, is sometimes it becomes an attractant for critters also. So I often will use my like dried wreaths inside. It's also while they're sturdy, they're not like, like that crazy storm, 2 days ago, that resistant. So I had a friend who used sunflowers in a wreath and ended up with like a squirrel hanging on her front door. It was like, I don't know how to get. Yeah, so we're told otherwise, yeah. And sometimes you don't even notice, you're like, why is that now edible? So yeah, you're making like a really lovely bird feeder. But again, a good use for sort of when it's done, just put it outside, don't take it apart. But yeah, that's, fresh, just give it a little spritz is great. Sort of opposite, more moisture, still no sun. Yeah, yes.
How do you dry lavenders without the flowers falling?
The trick is cut it very early, so it's almost like if you have, it's bottom up, sorry, I was like, is it top down or bottom up, so if it's like half or even a third open, then cut it then, and as it dries, the rest will open, so upside down and right side up works, upside, I often will do a mix, because what's fun about the right side up is they curve, and then you have a lot more movement. Sometimes lavender can be a little sticky like that, but if you're looking for straight, then definitely upside down. And if you have anything that gets too curly, you can, it's sort of a balance. You can sort of reanimate it by giving it a spritz and then making sure that it's not in like too kind of close of a room. So maybe like a kitchen, leaving it out, and it'll sort of like reanimate and get a little flatter. You can sort of play with it and then, plan to let it re-dry. But again, a lot of things have to be kind of judged a bit after that murderous week. So yeah.
I sort of missed it as well, the kind of silvery one, what the plants were.
This, the everlasting, I'll send it out so that you guys that way you don't have to write anything down.
List of what.
A list of all of these, exactly, yeah, absolutely. I was like, never go to any top of the plant list. Yes.
When you were saying that you were adding just a little bit of water when you were originally starting to
For
dry
drying?
them, are you then, once that little bit of water is done, are
Yes.
you adding more, or is that just gradual enough and that's all it needs?
Yes, that's just a gradual enough, and that's all it needs. And again, those are sort of the umbrella for those kind of puffy ones, something like this shape. What it does is it seems like it sort of takes it up again and holds it for a little bit longer, like it'll still be a little wet in the stem, even though it's dried or drying, and it just kind of almost like lets it like start to relax out, but it doesn't flop, it like gives just that little bit of, and it's like and then it's done, and it can just sort of stay there, and you can either choose to flip it at that time or keep it upright, just depending on sort of storage, all that kind of stuff.
So when you were talking about the combination of using live
Yes.
materials and the dried materials, can you just let them dry on the wreath and then
Exactly.
have it be a dried wreath?
Absolutely, and again, that's what's fun about, especially, I just pulled these particularly because they make such nice, just dried in place plants, because again, they'll sort of like a little fadier, but they sort of look the same. So these two especially, those sort of anything with like a thicker leaf. But if you have something and you're not sure, just practice, take it in, see what it does. But yeah, exactly, you can leave them on and then you have sort of a green plus, and just like a slightly lighter green over time, yeah. Yeah. No, okay, all right, well, I will send the plant list, and again, yeah, happy to show anything that if you saw or didn't see, show you up close or answer any questions you have.
I just have a question. When you're done, do you spray them like the fixative or hairspray?
No, I don't, you know, they're fine as is. Yeah, there was funny, someone, was saying, I was drying, so give me tulips and they dried and it was sort of pretty, and I thought, no, like, cause I'd heard you could like use, there's like a Mod Podge spray, and I was like, maybe just this one, so I'll use it. Just to keep them on, because they were so pretty, and as I was like holding it, like a little spider dropped out, I was like, right, that's why you don't do it. It was fine, but it was, but yeah, so yeah, the reason is because the whole, not to say the whole point, but the, ideally, you know, you recycle it on, the sort of work here becomes your compost later, and yeah, all kind of goes again, but yeah, no, this has been years and years out, and didn't need anything, so yeah, again, so long as a squirrel doesn't get in.
Do you ever use salvias? Does that dry?
Oh yeah, salvias dry beautifully, they retain their color really beautifully, so yeah, again, just about everything dries, you know, even roses can dry, and I think, again, for our California roses, you just want to cut them all like right as they open, because they'll sort of have the best chance of staying, you know, keeping their petals on, and they're just super, super delicate. It's like what I do for anything that's really, really hard to sort of maintain is I make the whole piece and I just like gently tuck those ones in. Yeah. Yeah, everything. But yeah, salvias are wonderful. And anything like salvia, I have in here, I have some agastache, anything that, you know, retains its scent over time. It's so wonderful, even though they've been out, you just, that little bit of handling, and you like the bay will keep its, keep its scent. It's so lovely. This bay, if you do have any, just a little bit of wash, but yeah. All right.
When rosemary dries,
Yeah.
does it get so brittle that it's gonna all fall off?
Again, generally brittleness is more a function of how fast it dries. So if it's in a really hot, sunny spot, it will dry really, really fast and get brittle. But so usually if you keep it in kind of a cool room, cool, dark, not damp, it's that slower drying process. And if anything, it's sort of leathery when it dries, like in the way that you would be able to best work with. Yeah. Some things, again, that's why sort of I think when we think of like evergreens, like indoors getting brittled and dropping their needles, it's because we usually have like, it's winter, you have the heat on in the house, it might be in the room with a lot of sun. It's more a function again of the drying process, which is why oddly, like again, a heat wave, you sort of don't want to pick on and plan to dry because it's, it can go too fast. And then they get like kind of crumbly.
When do you collect ferns for?
When? About now, I would say,
No, I mean, in terms of like, is the leaf still green when you collect
Oh,
it
yes,
and then
yeah.
you dry it,
No,
or is it
I
on its way out?
Yeah, ideally, most of these were collected in about their color now. My favorite is the sort of gold tones, so just off of green. And yeah, if there's like a little bit of green at the base, usually that will sort of dry out and kind of keep its green or kind of go gold. But yeah, I would say there's a lot of variety in terms of like, your pick, you want it sort of the burgundy, dark, do you want it sort of brown? So yeah, it's pick it at the color that you want.
I see.
So yeah, I have a lot that's kind of earlier in the season, that's more like this. And usually if you sort of miss the window on one section in your garden, like go around the back and see if there's someone hiding behind a tree that might have a later stage.
Yeah.
Or you can go to a garden that that's like shady or that kind of. Yeah.
How about things with berries? I know, so like toy on right now,
Yeah.
it's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Do they stay on as they dry?
So, Toyon is probably I give it like a medium. They stay on, they do get a little shrivelly, but it keeps its color really beautifully. And they tend not to fall off. They just kind of will raise it up a little bit. I would say, so yeah, I have no problem with how it looks. It just like it has maybe a shorter, like a sort of more of a shelf life, and it's like full form. Like a sambucus usually will keep, if you pick it early enough. So not all of it like completely like whatever the level of blue or purple you're going for. Then those tend to keep their shape a little bit better. The only problem is if it's too green, then it will also shrivel. I don't know why that is, but yeah, too green or too ripe. So they tend to get shrivel. I think it's like a moisture content kind of. But yeah, but it keeps for a very, very long time. So I would say if you're going for and Toyon will also sort of dry really nicely in the sort of same shape. So I would say if you get to a point where like, oh, I don't like that, it looks too sort of dry, you can kind of trim that section off and you still have a lot of color in like the body of the foliage.
What, because you mentioned elderberry, but
Yeah.
do the leaves stay on? Because they're so much
Yeah.
more delicate. I mean,
Yeah, same thing. I think I tend to use the, just as if with anything with drying, I would always say like test it first. But I would say, elderberry, the leaves will stay on again. You have to pick it early. Don't wait until it's sort of like self-drying before it drops. But yeah, pick it early and you can dry it. Although I would say I probably, just because it shrinks a lot, I tend to use it more for the berries than anything else. And the blossoms also, retain their scent.
oh,
So they get a little brown, but because they have so much nectar. The more nectar it tends to get browner if you dry it. But they're lovely too.
how about coffee berry? Because they're pretty big berries.
Yeah,
Do they
yeah.
dry okay?
They dry really well. I think almost more like an untreated olive kind of, because they have that like really tight skin, like they're really firm, there's not like a lot of, I think if you can squeeze something, it usually tends to get squishier over time. Yeah, coffee berries, great, yeah.
You're mostly using material that you've pruned for another purpose, or do you also go and harvest these
Yeah.
just for the?
Yeah, it's a mix. I think it's, sometimes it's fun, you're walking along and your neighbor has trimmed their redwood and you're like, may I have this? I'm already embarrassing my children and be like, oh my God, I'm gonna stop for a minute, I'm gonna ask them, and they're like, oh, I'm like, yeah, that embarrassment. But they do, it's just intrinsic. Sometimes I'm cutting from other things, but other times I'm growing for the purpose. There are some, I would say, I like shane fern, but I really love dried shane fern. So the reason I have it is to trim it, yeah.
In that vein, I've never pruned a manzanita, but I'm wondering about those pretty lantern flowers and how
Yeah.
they do.
They are not, they don't last the longest, but you can capture them. It's more that they can be a little bit difficult to work with. So capture them, they also shrink again, they're super, super fine. And so they like turn into like little tiny dots, but really, really lovely. My sort of most successful use of them has been just to cut an entire branch and then like use that as like a single dried piece, like over, kind of on a wall almost, rather than trying to work it into something. But they're, yeah.
Can we keep picking your brain about the different plants?
Sure.
What about the red buds?
Oh, yeah.
Are those?
Yes, so they absolutely dry, because they're so thick and heavy, it can be really easy for them to go, so if it's too dry, things get brittle and crumbly. If it's too wet, they'll get sort of dark and moldy, mushy. I find because they're so close together that they're into, hopefully in our wet season. I don't know, wait. They will be, they're just a little bit harder to sort of capture because they have a lot of moisture. It's almost like wisteria kind of in its,
Juicy.
yeah, they're really juicy. So, just like every single, if you were to cut a piece, dry them separately, like each piece hanging on like a yardstick kind of, yeah.
And then the other thing that you mentioned, some berries. So for example, an Oregon grape, you can have the pretty yellow flowers, which
Yes.
you might harvest for the purpose. And then you could put that with their berries.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Oh, no, I think it's a really beautiful if you can kind of combine things, even again, you take something completely fresh and put it in, even in like a, vase with water and your dried bits too. Again, that's why I sort of never throw things away. That pile can get overwhelming too. But you can always sort of add things in, yeah. But yeah, it's lovely to combine, dry each sort of piece too.
Are you able to do anything with oak leaves? For example, the black oak has really pretty, with lots of different fall colors.
Yeah.
But it's kind of crumbly, well, and when it dries.
Yeah.
it's crumbly.
Yeah, so again, try to get it when it's first turning, so those tannins are already like going, then, because again, it's, it's related to photosynthesis. So once that process has already started, they're kind of on their way into yellow. But I find if you clip them when they are still, almost still have a little bit of wiggle as opposed to like brittle, they last forever and they're probably my favorite, yeah.
Okay, so manipulate them while you can.
Exactly, yeah. So again, all dried things, even though ultimately they're going to be dried, you sort of want to get them early and greenish or sort of the earliest point of the color that you want to capture them in. So again, this yarrow, it was kind of unique because it was really like overseeded and puffy, but usually you can almost capture if you cut it in the sort of first open, like original bud moment, it will retain its shape, color, everything kind of perfectly. So again, decide, I guess another way of saying is also you can just decide what you want out of it, what sort of look you want. But yeah, there's a range. And sometimes you plan on one thing and you go away for the weekend and it bolts, but that works too. Yeah.
There's another wilder plant, the black walnut and the pretty yellow.
Yeah.
So then you might not do the little posies idea, you might do something a little more open work or.
Well, I think any material, it just depends on what you want out of it. This is sort of, I would say, a more traditional wreath look. But again, that can be sort of too matchy for someone. So yeah, you could also take just individual pieces of, larger material. Again, even that sort of bundle of the coyote, did I connect that? If it were unattached. So yeah, so again, or same thing with the oak, it's like, if you cut a large branch of it, I think that almost needs nothing, you sort of trim off some of the bits that are distracting and just go with that. But yeah, that's, that's the kind of slightly artistic part of it, is your own go. Yeah. Yes. Right, well, I will be here if you have any questions.
Thank you, Jill. That was great.